السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Can everyone hear me? Someone just tell me that the sound's okay, please. Someone can just kindly unmute themselves, just let me know that they can hear me.
Ustad, the sound is okay.
جزاك الله خير. بارك الله فيك. طيب بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. Welcome to our live Q&A. So as we started last month, and inshallah ta'ala this will become like a regular feature. We inshallah ta'ala after every Isnad course that we do, because we don't really get much time for Q&A in the class, a couple of days after the course we will do a live Q&A. So whether that's like on the Tuesday, Wednesday, probably most likely a Tuesday evening, we just do like a live Q&A on well, we were hoping to do it on YouTube, but we set up a new YouTube channel. I'm going to ask Ishmam to put the link into the chat group. So what we need you guys to do is to subscribe, please, to this YouTube channel. Because it's a new YouTube channel, I think YouTube restricts certain things. So it restricts, for example, by the way, can you guys see me? Can you guys see me? Because my video should be running as well. Yes, you can see me?
Yeah, can see you, Sheikh.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I think some of the people, someone's got some issues with that. They got technical issues on their side then. So yeah, it was meant to be on YouTube, guys, but the problem was that I don't think we have enough subscribers to be able to just start doing this on YouTube yet. So we need people to subscribe to the new channel. So if you could kindly do so, if someone could put the thing on, the YouTube link, like one of the brothers. I don't know if Hasia or Ishmam or whoever else is here, if someone can just kindly put that link on for the new YouTube channel that we created onto the chat group, and then if people can just click onto that, please, and then just subscribe, that would be a great help. And therefore we would inshallah ta'ala do this usually on YouTube live. The main thing for the YouTube live is simply because then we can have a record of it. So it's just, as soon as it's on YouTube live, it will just be recorded and then anyone can access it. The problem I think with this Telegram thing, there must be a way to record it, but I don't really know. I'm not quite sure. So last time it wasn't recorded either. I'm not sure if it's going to be recorded this time.
Now, inshallah. It's being recorded now. It will be uploaded to YouTube, inshallah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so but either way, inshallah, Ishmael, if you can put that link in for the YouTube as well, that'd be great. Okay. So we're going to go through the questions that we have here that I have in front of me, and then I'll ask anyone if they have any questions to add to that. We have about 35 odd questions that I can see. So as I said last time, this is not a fatwa Q&A. Like, it's not a fatwa session. I'm not just here to give fatwa. That has a certain time and place for it, and a certain way that you need to go and approach that issue. That's separate to what we're doing here. We're here to study and seek knowledge. And so these questions are based upon the course that we've done and the methodology of seeking that knowledge and the issues that, for example, maybe you didn't understand, or that you found somewhat maybe confusing, or you misunderstood, or you wanted more clarity on concerning the issues that we mentioned in class in terms of the fiqh issues. So in terms of personal questions, because I've seen there's some personal questions, some personal problems and so on, or some situations that other people may be in that people want clarity on, this isn't the place for that. And one of the things that we're very bad at doing, especially as Muslims in the West, and it's something that we need to get much better in doing, is separating between these things. What is a fatwa and what is fiqh and what is a learning platform? So what we're doing here is Q&A for fiqh, because we're trying to study and seek knowledge. It's not a fatwa session. And fatwa also by its very nature is meant to be individual. It's meant to be someone who's in a situation, they go to a teacher or they go to a sheikh and they ask them that question, and they take the answer that they get. It's not something which is usually done in a setting where there's lots of people, because someone may just think, oh, that applies to me also, but it may not necessarily apply to you. And so it's very much about circumstances. Sometimes those questions require more detail. Sometimes those questions are of a nature where other people are involved. So some like questions like inheritance, divorce, marriage, these are other people involved as well. And so it's difficult, therefore, just to take one side of that story and to give a fatwa. What that person needs to do is really go to their local imam or to their local body of Sharia body that they have in their locality. Most masjids have like a Sharia council that deal with these issues. They can sit with them if they need more information. They can get it if they need to speak to other people that are potentially involved in the issue. They can do that as well. So with that in mind, therefore, I may skip certain questions, and I apologize if I do so, but that's mainly going to be the reason why. The first question that I have is, what is the next fiqh book that we will be studying? So as I said, what we did this time around was Manhaj al-Salikin, which was just to give us like a very basic foundation of fiqh. The next book that we will do, we have a choice of a couple. And it's not 100% yet, so I don't want anyone to hold me to this or quote me on it. But possibly it may be something like Umdat al-Talib or Dalil al-Talib. One of those two books will be the next level that we will go on to, which is still a fairly foundation level method, but it's much more detailed, and it's done in a much more classical fiqh way, and that's the one that inshallah ta'ala then we will go into further detail concerning certain issues. Is masha acceptable on normal socks, or do the socks have to be thick enough? Anything that is called socks and you would consider to be a sock, it would be valid for. While the maternal brothers part of the fiqh shares, do they not fall into the third category after the fiqh shares and asaba? So they would usually, right, because they're related to you through your mother, and we said the relations from a mother are what we call dhawil arham. They're from your mother's side. They're your essentially maternal relations. The maternal brother is given the exception to the rule because he's your brother, because of his close proximity to you. So the other people are further away, but he is your sibling. This man, the brother or the sister who is from your maternal side, are your siblings. And so therefore they are given that exception to that rule, and Allah knows best. Is 2-to-1 sons and daughters, meaning a double share for sons, daughters, part of the fiqh share or asaba, and why? It becomes part of the asaba. So as we said, the daughter normally gets a fiqh share if she's by herself. But when there's a male equivalent, so for example, a brother with a sister, a son with a daughter, they are removed from their fiqh share and they are taken into the asaba, right? They are called asaba. And so there's different types of asabas, asaba bin nafs, asaba bil ghayr, and so on, but we're not necessarily going into that detail. And so the reason why that is because just say there were two daughters by themselves, they would receive 2/3. If they still remained as a fard or a fiqh share person with their brothers being present in the equation, meaning the son, then once they take 2/3, you can't give the son double their share because they've just taken 2/3 of the whole thing. So that's why they're then extracted from that particular category and moved into a different category, which is with the asaba, and that's what allows the double portion or the double share of the son to go to them, and the daughter getting one share. What does he mean by the freed slave and his asaba? Freed slave is basically someone, in the olden days when people had slavery still going on, if someone bought that slave and freed them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would pledge their allegiance to that person who freed them. And they have a certain number of rulings. From those rulings is they become like your asaba. And that's why on that list, they're the ones at the bottom. Like after everyone else, meaning there's no other male relative living, they are the ones who get the inheritance. And that's what it refers to. And they're asaba. So just say the freed slave, the person himself has passed away, but his son is living. That's his asaba. And so they become like asaba to you in that regard. So they are different to rada'a. Rada'a, as we said, is milk fostering. Those people are closer in the sense they're like family to you. These people, no. They're not like family to you in the sense they're not mahrams and you can marry them and so on. But this is a different type of allegiance that you have, and this is because of the favor that this person done to them when he freed them. Why is there an exception with young females and female slaves in willingness to accept? So remember, again, we have to be careful here, and we also have to understand and acknowledge and mention very clearly that UK law differs. So in the UK, you would follow UK law. We're speaking here in certain societies, and it's still the case, by the way, in many parts or in some parts of the world, but especially historically, even in Europe, where people or girls will get married relatively young. So you'll find that if anyone that studied European history, the history of royal families and monarchies and so on, you will find that sometimes girls used to get married well below the age of 16. So that's something which used to happen. So obviously now, even in most Muslim countries, they don't actually allow that. So now in most Muslim countries, I think they would have laws that would say to you that the girl has to be at least 16, 17, 18. I think that's pretty much the case in in many of the Muslim countries as well, and Allah knows best. But the point being here is that if you were in that situation, in that society where that young girl is allowed to get married, she's over the age of puberty, or she's just around the age of puberty, then her father gets more of a say simply because she doesn't yet have maybe the level of maturity that by which she would be able to say otherwise, and Allah knows best. Or it may be just a pledge, for example, like sometimes, even in some cultures now, they pledge the child in marriage. So, for example, they will say, at a very young age, that she's betrothed to so-and-so. They're not actually going to get married, and the consummation won't take place for many years yet. But they've essentially, they're essentially engaged for all intents and purposes. So he doesn't have to ask her for that particular purpose because she wouldn't be able to understand that situation at that time. Is the woman during her iddah period specifically after her husband dies not allowed to leave the house during the night? Yeah, so what it means is, obviously in the olden days, at night there was no need to leave. No one used to have, back in the day, there was actually no need for anyone to leave during the night because no one would leave, not men, not women. And so your needs would be fulfilled during the day. The general ruling of this is that she only leaves for a need. So if that need happens to be in the evening, for example, she works a night shift, or she needs to go in the evening because she needs to go to the doctors or a hospital or something, that would be fine. Right? So that's what it refers to. If I originally buy land for 5k, but as time passes, its value increases and it's worth now 10k, can you sell it for 10k? Yes, that's the nature of business, right? The nature of business and the nature of buying and selling stuff is that it increases or it decreases in price. And when you sell it, you would sell it for the price of that day. Can a man and woman talk privately if the dad has agreed to marry her to the man, however, they are not engaged or had nikah before? So as we said before, like when we were speaking in the class, we said, and the author gave the general ruling that it is permissible for him to see her, and therefore to speak to her in a limited way. I think people now have taken this concept to many different, angles and different tangents, and people have become slightly laxed in this, where they start now going for meals together, meeting up in parks together, and so on. And often it is not done with the knowledge of the wali. For me, I think this is something which should be avoided. Generally speaking, to the best of your ability, you stay away from this and minimize it to the best of your ability. The questions that you need to ask, you do it on that first, second meeting, you do it openly with whoever's there. And then if you want to continue, maybe you need to, ask some other things. You either ask through her brother or her father, a wali, or you email and CC them in if you want that direct contact. But this thing where it's like, no, we need to continue to meet. And so essentially it becomes like a dating thing, but, kind of not like dating, but somewhat similar in certain ways to dating. And then those two people have an attachment with each other, and then it becomes problematic. This isn't the way that you will find in the Sunnah. And that's not the meaning either, that you should go on, and this is something which continues now for a number of days and so on. This engagement period, becomes essentially like 6 months, and because we're engaged, therefore we can start doing certain things. No. All it means when you are engaged is that no one else has the right to go to that sister and propose to her. That's all that engagement means. Nothing else. Doesn't give you a right to now see her when you want and as you want, and to speak to her and to start doing other things. No, this is not the meaning of engagement. And so people sometimes think, no, because we're exclusive now, we've agreed, we're engaged to each other, we can start doing some of these other things. No. Up until the nikah is done, this woman is still a non-mahram for you. And so you would treat her in that way. The only thing that the engagement has now done is told everyone else, every other brother out there, every other Muslim man, that this sister is not now permissible for you to go and to propose to her, because the Prophet ﷺ forbade a proposal once it has been accepted. In terms of divorce, what if you don't agree with your spouse's conditions of divorce? For example, you would like a divorce straight away. I don't know what that means. And again, these types of issues when it comes to divorce and so on, these look like specific issues that need to be taken to an imam with more detail. In some cultures, it's become a modern custom to give the mahar after death or after divorce. How do you advise one navigates this? So the mahar is due as soon as the contract is signed. And as the author then said, rahimahullah ta'ala, once the marriage or once either the husband has died or the marriage has been consummated, it becomes wajib. So at that moment, because sometimes he may die before they have the chance to consummate, or they consummate the marriage, it now becomes wajib. And so therefore this is something which, I know in some cultures it is a problem, but it is not from the way of the sunnah. And so it is an issue of education, of telling people, of informing them, of teaching them. And that's why these courses and things like seeking knowledge and teaching knowledge and having them opening the messages and letting people access them for free and making them easy for people to obtain, something very important, because as sometimes we make knowledge exclusive, it becomes like something which has to be paid, and it becomes too academic, or it becomes like a university kind of thing. And that means that the average Muslim can't now obtain this, and they're just going to remain in their ignorance. The more of us that educate ourselves, and then we start educating the people around us in terms of our family and so on, the easier, inshallah ta'ala, some of these issues will become, especially if you're not living back home now, and those cultural issues are not as strong, and those attachments are not as strong as they perhaps would be back there. In my culture, sometimes the father gives his right away to marry his daughter off despite no issue. Is this allowed? I don't know what that means. If what you mean by that is, I don't know what that means. Okay, so we'll leave that. How do you reconcile between the hadith of marrying virgins and the Prophet ﷺ also marrying divorced women? There's no reconciliation needed. Both are clear. Both are halal. Both are permissible. So there's no reconciliation needed there. There's no contradiction that we need to reconcile between the two. Both are halal. Both are permissible. And as you mentioned yourself, the Prophet ﷺ did both. And so therefore each person, according to their circumstance, will do that which they did. And the Prophet never forbade anyone from marrying a divorced woman or a widow or anyone else or an older woman. And from those hadith is the story of Jabir radiallahu anh. Jabir, as you know, his father died on the Battle of Uhud. He was relatively young at the time. He had a number of sisters, and his mother left, and he had debt upon him as well that his father had left behind. A couple of years later, Jabir radiallahu anh decides to get married, and he marries an older woman. The Prophet ﷺ said to her, "Why didn't you marry someone your age, a virgin?" He said, "O Messenger of Allah, because my sisters are around my age, and I didn't want my wife to be like my sisters, meaning they're all in the same age. I wanted someone older that could help me with them, look after them, guide them, mentor them, and so on." And so the Prophet ﷺ said, "Okay, then that's fine." So each person depends on their circumstances. So there's no issue here in terms of reconciliation that is needed. Can you say some of the rights of the wife has on her husband and other way around? We went through all of this. The author went through this. So as we said last time, if you miss things in the book, then it is from the etiquette of the student of knowledge that they go back to the book. They go back to the lesson, especially in our time now when it's recorded, it's available. It's not a case of you missed it and it's gone. It's there and it's recorded. You go back to that section of the book, you listen to it. Number two, if you can't do that, you ask students around you that attended. That's how you do this. And so it's not actually from good etiquette that you ask the teacher to repeat something that was clearly studied and mentioned in detail in the class. Then now you're going to come and say, "Oh, actually, I missed it, so therefore I want you to repeat it for me now exclusively." That is not actually from good etiquette. And so that's something which we need to, we can't have that type of laziness creeping in. You go and you do what you need to do. Do warranties fall under riba? Not necessarily, especially if they're done at the time of purchase. At the time of purchase, not necessarily riba. At the time of purchase, it is a service that is given, but that would also depend on, on the exact type of contract. And that's the thing with contracts; you need to understand the exact nature and what's taking place, but not necessarily always riba. Must we know when alcohol is fermented during vinegar making process to know if food containing spirit or wine vinegar is halal, or do we assume all of it is halal? If it's from a shop and it's made as vinegar, then inshallah ta'ala it is halal, and Allah knows best. Is expiation required if you swear by Allah that you are no longer friends with someone who was irritated, but also meaning it as a joke? So as we said, as the author mentioned, rahimahullah ta'ala, when it comes to expiations, it goes back to your intention. It goes back to the wording and the intention. So if you said something and you meant it as a joke, then that would be counted as what we call laghwul yameen, vain speech. Vain speech meaning that you didn't actually intend it as an oath, you just said it as a joke, or you said it as part of your discourse, and therefore there is no expiation due, and it's not counted to be an oath either. And each person therefore is responsible for this, right? So every person knows their intention and what they truly intended by it and what they meant. And so it's not just about me saying or you saying, "Oh, I was joking." What did you actually intend and what did you mean? And you go along with that. In Surah An-Nur, Zani marries not but a Zani or a Mushrika. In this case, is this the case only for those who have repented? Yes, that is the case for only those who have repented. So when the scholars say that it is haram to marry a Zaniya, obviously what they mean by that is up until he or she has repented. Once they have repented and they turn back to Allah Azza wa Jal, then it is the position of many of the scholars that that ruling no longer applies to them. How do you determine their repentance? That is something which you see in terms of their conduct and their behavior and their, their worship of Allah Azza wa Jal and their general demeanor. You can see if someone is still upon that issue or they have changed, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. What if the husband does not want to take his wife back after issuing the first divorce, regardless of whether she is in her iddah or out of it? That's his choice. So if he doesn't want to take her back in that first iddah period, or in the after that first talaq during her iddah period, then the iddah would elapse and they would remain divorced. They would become divorced. And so he doesn't have to take her back. It is an option that is there, because sometimes people, once they have been separated, once that divorce has been issued, people then regret what they did, or they realize that actually things went so bad, or they want to try again. And that is what Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions in the Quran, so long as they hope to reconcile. If that is their intention and they do it for that sincere intention, then it is something which is permissible. And so therefore, that's an option. But at the same time, if he doesn't want to and he thinks that no, actually he made the right decision, and therefore he just lets the iddah end and each one goes their own way. Okay. We sell products in exchange for money, so I'm struggling to understand why someone would exchange dates for dates. There's no profit for anyone here. Because dates were the main staple food at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are many different types of dates. Dates that are fresher, dates that are older and drier, and so people like fresh stuff over dried stuff. So if I have, for example, dry stuff, and someone else has fresh stuff, I may want to get rid of some of my dry stuff to get some of the fresh stuff. It's nicer, more pleasant to eat, and so on. And so we now have dates, in Ramadan, or just as like the odd thing, kind of like just an odd item. Whereas this was their staple food. This was their staple food, and also it was one of the means by which they would, it sometimes became a means of currency for them, especially amongst the poor, because they didn't have money. I thought it's not allowed to sell a product that one doesn't possess, but you said it's allowed. In that case, is dropshipping permissible? So what we said is that it's not allowed to sell a product that you don't own. What that means, you don't own, it means that you can't obtain either. So it's something which you don't have the ability. So, for example, when someone says that I sell you the bird in the sky, you have no real possible way of attaining that product. But something which you can more or less obtain, right? Which is the way that many things are done now. So, for example, when we just say, for example, you go through a broker and you want to book a hotel, for example, during Hajj in Mecca, those hotels are very busy. You have brokers that come and they buy, or they will buy rooms for you, or they will buy rooms when there is demand for them. So you're not buying directly from the hotel. That person will see, I have a demand of 50 rooms. He will go to the hotel and he will buy them. He's fairly sure that he can obtain them because it's something which he does and he has access and so on. So therefore, if you have that ability to get it or to get that product, then it is inshallah ta'ala permissible to sell. The problem here is when you can't, or you don't know, or it's not something that you just think you may be able to. That's now taking liberties in that process. The 3 times divorce process was not very clear to me, a bit confusing. Can you please go through this again slowly? So a husband and wife are married. We said that the divorce, if he wishes to divorce his wife, it must be done after the monthly cycle has finished. So a period where the monthly cycle has finished and he has not yet been intimate with his wife. He then says once, I now divorce you. That is now called the first divorce. She now has to go into a waiting period of 3 monthly cycles. 3 monthly cycles. During that period of 3 monthly cycles, the husband has the option to tell his wife that he wants to reconcile with her, and then they rejoin as husband and wife once again. If those 3 monthly cycles elapse and he hasn't done that, that divorce has now come to an end. If they wish to get married after that time, they have to do the whole thing again, a whole new contract, witnesses, wali, all of the same stuff, new dowry, everything again. If he reconciles, though, during that period, he has the option, brings her back, they reconcile, and then they stay married, and then after a while, he issues a second divorce. He says, I've divorced you again now. This is the second time now. Then she again goes on to this waiting period, again, the 3 monthly cycles. Again, he has the option to take her back. If he does so, they reconcile for a second time. Then after a while, he says, no, actually, I divorce you now. The third time, she leaves, and he has no right to take her back. That's what it means by the 3 divorces. So after the third time, he cannot say to actually, no, I want to reconcile again. No. Now she cannot reconcile with him until or unless she gets married to another man in a genuine marriage, and they consummate that marriage, and then they genuinely themselves divorce. He divorces her for some reason. Then the first husband comes and says, I want to marry you again, and then they do the whole new contract and everything again. That is how they would reconcile in that particular case, and Allah knows best. Is it permissible to eat meat products from halal, non-HMC places and so on? I'm not going to get into the whole HMC, non-HMC issue. That's not really anything to do with our fiqh class. Is it permissible to kill insects at home, such as spiders and bugs? Yes. If it is something which you think is harmful, or something which is considered to be a nuisance, and those types of things, then it is permissible. And if it is not, and it is something that you can get rid of in a safe way, like for example spiders and so on, fairly easy to trap and catch, and then just take them outside the home, that is obviously better. Were any of the areas in fiqh course written contracts, or were they all assumed to be verbal? So, generally speaking, they're all verbal, because that is how, imagine, like especially in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when many people are illiterate, and even in our times you have people that are illiterate, and so the Sharia is for everyone, and so therefore most of these are verbal. However, Allah Azza wa Jal says that you would either have witnesses, right? So the whole point of writing something down is to have a record of it, and so if there's a dispute, you can go back to that record. So what does the Sharia do? Two things. Number one, you have witnesses, or number two, you write it down. And so, for example, if you look in the verses that speak about the longest verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا تَدَايَنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَى أَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى فَاكْتُبُوا. Allah says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Surah Al-Baqarah, or you who believe, if you're going to take a loan, then for a period of time, then write it down, meaning write it down as a contract. So both of those are present. However, if someone does it and it's just a verbal thing, it is permissible. If a group of people were accused of killing somebody unjustly and the victim's family decide and blood money are all requested to pay the same amount separately, no. It would be a single amount, and Allah knows best whatever is agreed. Dropshipping we did. Cryptocurrency, Allah Alam, I don't know. You have to ask someone else. Is it allowed for me to continue with life assurance and private medical assurance, which are included in my benefits package at work free of cost? Yes. If it's something which is just free as part of your contract, then inshallah it is okay. Can I take contents insurance as well for my house? So again, we're going now into the issue of fatwa, and so I'm not going to answer some of these questions. Off topic, it would be very great to do a detailed series on the seerah, like Shaykh Yasir Qadi's. Yeah, that is something inshallah ta'ala we will do. It won't be as detailed, obviously, as Shaykh Yasir's, because he spent 100, I think, lessons or more going through it in a very detailed way. For us, as we know in Isnad, our thing is to find books and to go through them. And so obviously seerah would be one of those things, and aspects connected to seerah. So our next course is kind of like a seerah course, because the Shama'il of Tirmidhi, the book of Shama'il, which is the character of the Prophet ﷺ and his physical descriptions and certain things that he liked and disliked, that is part of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we will do it, but not probably in the way that Shaykh Yasir did, and that's because I don't see the need of repeating something that was done in that, to that level of detail and that much time and effort's been put in. There's not really any point in me just repeating something that was already done in that way. Can foster siblings inherit? No. Generally speaking, foster siblings don't inherit. It is the full or the blood relations that inherit, and that's why we mentioned that when it comes to the. So again, guys, you have to pay attention when we go through the book, and if you don't understand something, the first thing to do is to go to the book first and to reread it, to re-listen, and then if something still doesn't make sense, come to me. The author mentioned, rahmatullahi ta'ala, that when it comes to inheritance, it is done either through blood relations, or it is done through marriage. Right? It is done through marriage, or it is done, as we said, through al-wala. Who are the five? Rawahul Khamsa. The five are the four Sunan and the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. So when they say that it's related by the five or collected by the five, it is the four Sunan and the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. If there are no paternal male relatives alive, can maternal male relatives marry out a woman? Yes, they would be her next closest family members then, and Allah knows best. If someone studies an earlier fiqh matter like Umdat al-Fiqh and he follow those rulings, if they oppose the later Hanbali scholars, or must he follow the laters? So you don't follow read a book to follow its rulings in that way. The best way, if you're not of that level yet, is to find a teacher and to listen to that teacher and to go with their rulings. So you don't just take a fiqh book and say, I'm just going to follow everything within it. Especially a book like Umdatul Fiqh, which is meant to be a very basic text of fiqh. What you would do is you would go to a teacher, your imam, your local sheikh, whoever it is, and the questions that you have that you need guidance on, that is what you do. So again, this is a syllabus that we're studying. And don't confuse the two, because that will become problematic. In the last course, the rules relating to needing a mahram: is it possible for a single woman to travel with a trustworthy group of Hajj, for Hajj or otherwise if there is no mahram? This is an issue of difference of opinion. Some of the scholars said it is permissible, and others said that it is not permissible because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Again, my advice would be that you would go to your local sheikh and explain your circumstances, and then take whatever position they give to you. I have been wiping my socks in wudu, and I prayed Maghrib after 24 hours of wiping those socks, but I forgot. Do I have to repeat that prayer? So if that's something, if you were a resident, the wiping of the socks begins, or the time period begins from the first time you wiped over the socks, not from the first time you wore the socks. So the first time you made wudu after you put on the socks. So for example, I make wudu, full wudu in the morning. I put on my socks, for example, at 8 a.m. I don't remake my wudu again until maybe Asr, Dhuhr, Maghrib. That's when the 24-hour period starts, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. How do we tell what the strongest opinion is, and who finds out what the strongest opinion is? That's something which you do the more that you study and the more that you learn. You will inshallah ta'ala be able to determine that to a certain level, depending on how much you learn and what level you attain. But even so, as we know, and that's the reason why you have different positions among scholars and differences of opinion, even then people will still differ. So what you will consider, or what a scholar will consider to be his strongest opinion, will not be the same as another one, because otherwise there would be no difference of opinion. So it's not as easy as maybe you think, as maybe you think that it may be. If I missed a part of the course, can I read this to you at some point? If you mean the book, yes. Obviously not the whole thing. You just need, for the ijazah, you just need the Arabic. So again, this is like a good point, Jazakallah khair, Brother Adil, for reminding me, and I should have mentioned this at the course. So the ijazah can be taken by anyone. So we've started an ijazah, inshallah ta'ala, we'll get one for Manager Sadiqeen also, for those who attend live and those who attend online. There's a difference between the two in the sense that the one who attends live is given the full ijazah. The one who attends online is given what we call a general ijazah. And that's because simply we don't know if they attended the whole thing or not, and whatever is difficult to determine when someone is in front of you. If the people who attend on site, and this is only for those people on site, because again, for other people it's a general ijazah, so for them to read the book wouldn't have any, or the parts that they missed wouldn't have any meaning. But for those who attended on site and then you missed a section, yes, you're more than welcome to tell me and read that to me. And if you tell me, inshallah ta'ala, if you come for the next course and you remind me, we will set a time apart for that. And that applies to anyone who was there and they missed sections of the book. What you read, though, is just the Arabic, because English is a translation. So the Sanad is for the Arabic part of the book, and that's one of the reasons why we read every book in Arabic as well as in English, because the chain of narration is to the author's work, which is the original Arabic. The translation is, mine or someone else's, and so therefore, that's not what the ijazah is for. If talaq ba'in is written on divorce papers, although it was the first talaq and the 3-month iddah has just begun, with the divorce be talaq ba'in? So we've mentioned, right, what is talaq raji and what is talaq ba'in. I don't understand what it means by if it's written on divorce papers. And it may be, as we said, irrevocable for another reason. So maybe it's written as a talaq ba'in for a different reason. As we said, there are other types, and the author mentioned 4 types that if you go back to the course, you will see. If someone is asked by a potential spouse if they have committed zina, what do they say if they have repented? So firstly, I think that question, a person has to be careful of the kind of question that they're going to ask. So if a person has a suspicion about someone, then I would suggest that they find that out in a different way. Maybe find out from someone else who may know, or someone who's close to them, and see what they say. But if you think that person has made sincere repentance and tawbah, then that's not really a question I think that should be asked at that point, because it is better to veil the sins of others, as is generally the sunnah. The sunnah is that we generally veil the faults and the sins of others, especially if they're making tawbah and they've turned back to Allah Azza wa Jalla in repentance. And Allah knows best. Okay. When will the Arabic courses start, inshallah ta'ala? That's something which we're working on, inshallah ta'ala. It may take some time. I hope that it will be sooner rather than later. But I don't have a fixed time for you. It's because we want to do it somewhat different to what is already out there. And that means that it's going to be slightly take a bit of time in order to, and like with Isnad, a lot of the stuff that we start, somewhat of a trial and error process. And so just bear with us, inshallah ta'ala. And we need to find out, we need to determine what is the best format. Do we want to do online or on site or both? So a lot of this will depend also on the brother that's going to teach it, the teachers and what they prefer and how it works and logistics, and there's a number of things that we need to take into consideration, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so that's all the questions here. Anyone want to ask a question? You can raise your hand. I don't know if you can raise your hand in Telegram or you just unmute yourselves. Any questions? Okay, so if there's no questions, then inshallah ta'ala we will conclude today. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khair for joining. And inshallah, within the next, hopefully, week or so, we will launch the next course. We'll give you the dates and so on. But it will be roughly in about a month's time, so towards just before Ramadan. And as we said, it will be the book of Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya by Imam al-Tirmidhi, rahimahullahu ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum, wa sallallahu ala nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.